everyone, and welcome to the next installment of the ASMR Boss playthrough series. This is Dark Souls 3. So, for those of you who haven't seen my other videos of a similar style, basically I've saved all of my footage of each victory over all of the bosses in the game, and I've put it together into this video, and I'm going to be narrating it with a ASMR commentary track. Let's begin. So, the first main point to be made about Dark Souls 3 is that it is very referential to other moments of the series. So in a way, something that I enjoy is that this game feels like a collection of the greatest hits of the series. Now, some may take issue with that, and I guess a fair criticism is that the game doesn't necessarily have its own sense of identity because it is so rooted in elements of the previous games. But seeing as this is the last Dark Souls game, I think it was an appropriate way to go out on a sort of victory lap, reliving all of the fun times we had, dying to cosmic monstrosities and weird beasts from beyond our wildest nightmares. And in reference to Dark Souls 1, this intro is very similar, as it sets up the nature of the world and then shows you a bunch of monsters that are going to be the bosses that you'll have to fight and die to again and again and again. These are basically all the guys that are going to mess you up in your playthrough. And that's very similar to the intro of Dark Souls 1, which showed the lords finding the souls and using those to conquer the dragons. And then, of course, it also establishes who the main bosses of the game will be, to give you a little context to it all. But I think it's a nice intro, a nice way to start the game. It sort of explains that there are the unkindled, who are basically the hollow ones that are arisen to have their duty of linking the fire, and then it shows you who these creatures that previously linked the fire, and you're gonna have to go kill all of them. The basic plot of Dark Souls 3 is that, once again, the fire fades, as it always does, and we, as an unkindled, have a duty to try and rekindle the fire. And for that, we will need the Lords of Cinder, so that we can access the kiln of the first flame. However, they have all fled their duties, as they no longer wish to be part of this cycle, probably because we're at the third game of this series, and nothing really has changed for the better. It's all the same old drab, dreary darkness. But that is for you to decide. So, as is tradition on this series, I'm going to go ahead and get my character all nice and ready to prepare to die. And, of course, we always have to name our character Bookface. It is a tradition on this series. And so I'll just basically use this time to talk a little bit about starting the game, and also give an overall general review. In terms of class, what I like about the Dark Souls games is you can pick a starting class to determine your starting setup, but once you've done that, you're really free to customize your character as you want by leveling up into any stat you would like. But I usually start with the Knight class because I've never really been one to use magic in these games. I feel that, like, I could just never get it to sort of work properly. It doesn't really gel with my playstyle. Which is weird because I see so many people online, they have like all these pure magic builds and they can wreck players with one spell, and I try to use it and then they dodge my spell and backstab me instantly. So the Knight class is where I'll keep it. In terms of Burial Gift, you get to pick one little extra item to start with. The good thing about this is that they're all readily available in the main game, and none of them are like too much of a benefit. It's just one little extra item you can give yourself. I picked the Fire Gem because I thought that Fire Longsword would be a good combo like it was in Dark Souls 2. But unfortunately, the way Fire Gems work is that they remove your weapon's strength and dexterity scaling and add intelligence or faith scaling to the fire damage. And that was not going to be my playstyle, so I never really ended up actually using that Fire Gem. But, oh well. So, in terms of my overall thoughts on the game, I definitely like it better than Dark Souls 2, but it's hard for me to tell where I rank it with the others. I don't think it's as inventive or original of a game like Bloodborne, and I feel though it is more consistent than Dark Souls 1, so perhaps I might place it middle of the pack. Because while there are ups and downs to the game, I think that none of the downs really drag it down that much, regardless of what some may say. I actually find that a lot of the negative aspects or areas people hate, like Irithyll Dungeon, I actually enjoyed, despite being very frustrating. So it's kind of hard for me to judge it on that aspect. One thing I will say is I'm not sure if I sort of got better at the game, but I feel that overall Dark Souls 3 was a lot easier than the other games in the series for me. I mean, out of the 5 games, this is the 4th one I've played. But even with playing Dark Souls 2 and Bloodborne, having beaten Dark Souls 1, I still struggled with many areas of those games. And it was very rare for me to beat a boss on the first try. Whereas this one, things went a lot more smoothly. And I was actually able to win against invaders, which I never have been before. Usually if I got invaded, it was a total death sentence. I'd hit a guy and get like 1 HP off of him, and he'd return a hit and one-shot me. But maybe they've just figured out things and made them more balanced. So, that's just a little thought. I like that there are fewer bosses in this game. It meant that they were more focused on creating really good bosses. And even the ones that aren't as good as the best ones still have some nice little form of design or inventiveness to them. In my second playthrough of the game, there wasn't really any boss that I can think of that I hated fighting. There were a few where I thought, okay, this is just, another speed bump I've got to get through to progress to the real meat of the game. But, that's a far cry from just thinking, oh no, I have to do this again, what? So, that's definitely a point in its favor. Mechanic-wise, I feel the game is a little faster along the lines of Bloodborne's combat, which I'm okay with. I felt going through that I was slowly transitioning away from using tower shields and being a turtle when it came to fighting, and I was more into dodging and two-handing weapons. And it's essentially the way I tried to play the game throughout. And I was very pleased with the results. Obviously, you'll see more of that when I get to it. Overall, it is kind of sad that this is the end of the series, but it was a nice send-off overall. And I'm glad that it turned out the way it did. This is definitely one of the, better games in the series in terms of its consistency, and definitely one of my favorite games. And I also feel it has more replayability, perhaps due to the Covenants and the ease of online connectivity, since it is the most recent one. And that's pretty much it for my review of the overall game. I'll get into more specific details related to each of the bosses, the areas, and the lore that surround them. I guess I'll just end this segment by once again giving a shout out to all of the great YouTube channels out there that have helped me with my experience of the Souls game, like Democracy, Vati, Dave Control, Fighting Cowboy, Over the Gun. They're all great YouTubers. Definitely check out their content if you haven't already. I hope you enjoy this video, and with that we'll just sort of fast forward through this last little bit so we can get on with fighting some bosses and talking about some lore and all that other fun stuff that the Souls games are good for. Our story begins as the bell tolls, thus calling us unkindled to rise, to link the fire. This is our character rising from the grave in the cemetery of Ash. And it is from here that we will proceed on our quest to find some way to link the fire, thus keeping it from fading away into nothingness. This is a very nice tutorial area that gives you a good grasp on all of the mechanics. It's not too difficult for new players, but there's a few nice little hidden areas that you should come back to later when you're a little stronger. It's always important to remember to not die to the first enemy. And we'll proceed through this tutorial area to get to the first boss, Iudex Gundyr. So, Iudex Gundyr, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, I'm probably not, is the first boss of the game and the end of the tutorial segment. I really like this boss fight because it is challenging enough for new players, but still fun enough for veterans of the series. For us to progress to the Firelink Shrine, you're going to have to pull the coiled sword out from Gundyr. This gives you a chance to get a few hits in before his health bar actually appears. So, I think one challenging thing about this fight is that you only have 3 Estus flasks, and he'll do a decent amount of damage to you, especially if you don't have armor for your starting class. So you have to do very well at dodging and blocking his attacks. He can be parried, but I wasn't really getting the timing down right, so I decided to go primarily into dodging mode. One thing also I like about Gundyr is that he sort of sets up the concept that these are going to be multi-stage boss fights. You'll see here he goes full-on Resident Evil 5 Ouroboros virus mode. It's a very scary moment, one that you'll usually catch players off guard, but I find what's best is to actually stay right up close to him. For some reason, it really limits the amount of attacks he does, and I find they're a lot easier to dodge. It also seems like he takes more damage in this phase, particularly from fire. So if you picked the fire bombs as your gift, those will definitely come in handy here. And with that, you will gain the Ember, this game's equivalent of humanity, which will give you a nice little boost to your health, and also enter you into the online area of the game. Once we have defeated Gundyr, we can proceed to the Firelink Shrine, a nice throwback to the same shrine in Dark Souls 1. And here we will come across a lovely, colorful cast of characters that will provide us emotional support throughout our journey. This is the Firekeeper, with which you will level up. It's interesting because, despite the fact that Dark Souls 1 is the only game to do it, I actually like that you just level up from bonfires wherever you want in that game, rather than returning to a hub world to talk to some female servant or maiden to level you up. But I guess that's not really the Dark Souls formula, because only one game out of the entire series does that. But in any case, we will level up from here, and thus go through the bonfire to find the Lords of Cinder. They do not want to return to their thrones, so we shall bring them back as ashes. And I guess that's good enough to count. So after this, you'll put the coiled sword into the bonfire, and from here we will travel out into the world to find the Lords of Cinder. I like that this game has kind of another downward progression of verticality. We start off at the top of the castle and slowly descend into the depths below to find the Lords of Cinder. The second boss we will get to in our journey to find the Lords of Cinder is Vordt of the Boreal Valley. This fight is probably going to be a little challenging if you're a little newer to the series. I feel that he's best approached as if he were a Bloodborne boss due to his relentless speed. But the trick to defeating Vordt is the golden rule of Souls bosses, and that is, always remember to stick to that booty. The best way I find is to basically get underneath or behind Vordt, and then most of his attacks will miss you. If you stay further away, you're more likely going to get charged by him. Vordt is of the Boreal Valley because he is, I believe, one of the trusted knights to the Pontiff Sulyvahn, and he is placed to prevent the Unkindled from leaving the High Wall of Lothric, and thus keeping the gates closed for those trying to get in. The counterpart to Vordt is the Dancer of the Boreal Valley, but more on her later. So, the weapon I'm mainly going to be using are katana weapons. This one is the Uchigatana. I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but you can get this from a NPC. He's not an invader, but he's a non-respawning enemy, and he's located to one side of the Firelink Shrine. If you defeat him, you get his weapon, and it's very good for early game. This second phase of Vordt is probably the most dangerous thing to watch out for, and that's because he goes into a big charge, which can easily sort of charge you over. But he follows it up with that Frost Breath attack, which is very easy to punish, because he's sort of stun-locked into doing it for a while. It seems like he also has a few extra AoEs to his attack that leave frost in the area. If you get frostbitten, it basically means you're going to move slower and you recover less health from your Estus. But as long as you stay mobile and remember to stick to that booty, Vordt shouldn't be too much of a challenge for you. I'm going to show this next little bit because it's a nice little cutscene. But basically, you have to remember to go the opposite direction of Vordt and go talk to Emma, who's this old lady sitting in this large boss-looking area. She will give you a banner. When you get to the edge, you will see a prompt to raise the banner. And this will give us a nice little sort of fan-servicey scene again to Dark Souls 1. It also allows us to sort of view the layout of the land as well. It gives you a good scope for the world you'll be exploring. So these weird demon, monster, devil things, they were in Dark Souls 1 if you remember. They helped carry you to and from Anne Orlando. And these guys here will carry you to the Undead Settlement, which is the next area of the game. Though, it would have been nice if they could have carried us just like a little bit further, perhaps. Make the journey a bit easier. But in any case, we must now progress to the Undead Settlement. The next boss you can encounter, although it is optional, is the curse-rotted Greatwood. It is useful for you to defeat this boss because you will get the transposing kill. With this, you can give it to Lidlith. He's the guy who is actually on his throne, and he will make boss weapons for you. So, if you want any boss weapons whatsoever by transposing their souls, you would be wise to get the transposing kiln from the curse-rotted Greatwood. And you'll see you have to kill a few of these guys, sort of go near it to get its attention. Now, this boss fight, I don't find it that difficult, but some of his attacks can hit pretty hard. And if you haven't done a good job of increasing your Estus usage through the Estus shards that you can find, then it might present a challenge. I usually find that I level up very quickly at the beginning of Souls games, and that's because I want to have as much of an advantage as possible. So the important thing to note with the Greatwood is that you can't actually hurt him just by attacking him in regular areas. What you'll need to do is hit him on these sack-like areas, and once you destroy them, it will do massive critical damage. The only annoying thing is that getting to some of them can be a lot easier said than done. And I find that sometimes he has a tendency to sort of do a bit of a ground slam that leaves all of this like acid lying around, and it'll really damage you. And I'll be honest, this boss is he's quite nasty. It's not very pleasant to talk or think about. Just the overall sheer disgustingness of this rotted tree. I don't really know much lore about him. Perhaps he's just some kind of culmination of rot in this world. But in any case, he's got a thing to give you boss weapons, so we have to fight him. And there's another phase to this fight, and that is he'll do this ground slam and take us down into the Pit of Hollows, and he grows this giant arm out of his crotch-like area. It's very, very disgusting indeed. Fun fact about this place, this is where you enter the Moundmaker's Covenant, which is kind of like the chaotic order of covenants in this game. But you have to get to it before you fight this boss, and you do that by following the right path in the Undead Settlement until you come to a cage bearer who isn't hostile. The main trick with this fight is just to get hits in when you can in his sack-like areas, and once you destroy them and do enough damage, then you'll really start to sort of break through his defenses easily. He's not one of my favorite fights in the game. He's kind of meh, but he's not a horrible boss fight, and I like that you have to be creative about the way that you kill him. After you have made it through the next area, the Road of Sacrifices, the next boss you will come across is the Crystal Sage. He's a sorcerer that will spam you with lots of magic attacks. So the best strategy is, once you see him appear, get in as close as you can while dodging the spells, because then he'll stop using magic and he'll try to get away, giving you a chance to punish him with a bunch of hits. You'll see I've already taken him for nearly half his health. The really difficult part, though, comes in when he starts making copies of himself. Now, the way to tell them apart is that his copies use blue magic, whereas the original uses purple, and all of the copies die in one hit. So what I like to do is quickly run around and kill all of the copies. Thus, it gives me as much time as I want to deal with the original. Now, this fight is not really too difficult so long as you've got the proper dodge skills. If you do get stun-locked by a big spell combo, it can be pretty deadly. And I know there are ways to sort of cheese him by keeping one of his soul masses on so he doesn't teleport or stuff like that, but in terms of a non-speedrun strat and just a regular strat, the main tough part just comes for when there's all these spellcasters flinging all these spells at you. It's really a fight where being fast and quick is advantageous. I don't really know too much about the Crystal Sage in terms of lore, but I have a feeling that he's related somehow to Big Hat Logan from Dark Souls 1. And this is because they have a similar giant hat, and when you kill the non-respawning mini-boss in the archives, he drops a scroll, Logan's scroll, I believe. Perhaps he could be some kind of dark reincarnation of him, or perhaps this could be some kind of devotee that's gone evil. I'm not sure exactly. This definitely is sort of a lower boss fight for me. It's funny, this bit, I ran out of Estus and I tried to quickly go in for the kill, and you'll see I did kill him, but it was exactly when I died too. But I said that counts. That definitely does count. I was a little worried, though, that perhaps I had somehow screwed everything over by, killing him, but not necessarily counting it as a victory. Because after the loading screen, you'll see that I spawned back at the previous bonfire. But after a long and very scary journey back over, my souls, they were still there, and everything was fine, and we were able to light the bonfire as normal. So it all worked out, and that technically counts as a victory. I mean, I still died, but I got him, and that's what matters. once again, not necessarily the best boss fight in the game, but definitely not the worst. And still, it's nice and creative in how quick you have to be dodging all the spells and fighting the copies. And with that, we will be able to progress on to the Cathedral of the Deep. The next boss is the Deacons of the Deep. They are found in the Cathedral of the Deep, guarding the tomb of Saint Aldrich. So, this fight is kind of a gimmick puzzle fight, similar to the Prowling Magus Congregation or the Royal Rat bosses in Dark Souls 2. So basically, it's a room full of regular enemies, and they don't really do that much damage, and a lot of times they won't even aggro to you. And what you need to do is, you see there's the one deacon that has the sort of glowing aura to it, the red light. You have to kill that one, and then it gets passed on to another deacon, and you do this for the first half of the fight until the archdeacon appears, and then you mainly have to just kill him. So, it's probably the weakest fight in the game, but I will give them credit for trying to do something interesting. The only downside is that the puzzle bosses like this, I find usually you either run around until you've figured it out, and then it's never a challenge again, or you've already looked up and seen what the puzzle is, and thus you've never had the challenge of figuring it out from the start. But I'll give it this, at least it has a little more substance to it than something like Prowling Magus. In this case, there's a little more lore to the story, and there's a little more variety, and it actually can get slightly difficult near the end, because once the archdeacon appears, after you've killed enough of these deacons, they can summon a lot of dark magic spells, and there will be a lot surrounding the archdeacon. So, if you're not careful, it is quite easy to sort of get in a stun lock and get surrounded by them. So, even though this fight is a cakewalk compared to many others, you shouldn't get too overly confident, as I probably did several times in this fight. The main thing you gotta watch for again is all of these extra spells that they can do, because getting hit by 3 or 4 of them in succession will not be good. So, story-wise, the Deacons are meant to be like the servants of Aldrich, and he was originally supposed to be in this tomb because he's this pile of sludge from having devoured so many. But I believe he's not here, and that's because he's in Anor Londo, because he was summoned by the Pontiff Sulyvahn to help him overthrow the old gods of Anor Londo. We'll get into more detail about those bosses, but the basic idea is that Aldrich is devouring Gwyndolin from the first game. And so this archdeacon is sort of the watcher of it. But as long as you sort of stick close to them and don't give them a chance to use any of their big power-up spells, this boss fight is probably the easiest one in the game. It is mandatory, because you'll need it to get to Irithyll. This next segment is not a proper boss fight, but one that I figured I would throw in just as a nice little callback, and you do get a boss soul from it. Any fan of this series will recognize that this is a stray demon from Dark Souls 1, and when you're going through Farron Keep, you can find this one just sort of chilling, hanging out on the bridge. So, he's a mini-boss because he won't respawn, and it's nice sort of to see a nice callback, have an enemy in this. He has a few extra attacks, which makes the fight interesting. And, I think it is possible from his grab attack to get thrown off the roof as well. And the other thing to watch out for is that he still does decent damage, despite having many telegraphed moves. The lore implications are that in this age, or cycle of fire, the demons are all dying out. We'll talk more about that when we get to the old Demon King, but basically you can see why this stray demon, he's just sort of lost, wandering, and he's crippled, and old. But in any case, defeating him will net you a boss soul, and later on, after you've encountered Havel in Archdragon Peak, you can come back here to get his armor set. So, the first Lord of Cinder that we will fight is the Abyss Watchers, Farron's Undead Legion, the Artorias Fan Club. So, these knights, I believe, were basically tasked with the job of preventing the spread of the abyss, the spread of darkness. But as we can see here, they eventually have succumbed to the same darkness, much like Artorias in Dark Souls 1 did. That's why there's all of this infighting between them, as they're trying to kill each other off, because it's all they can do to prevent the spread of the abyss. And we can see this in the environment as well, with all of the poison and destruction that has come to the swamp from the power of the dark. So, this fight is definitely one of my favorites in the game. It is stylistically similar to, obviously, Artorias, but also Lady Maria from Bloodborne, or perhaps a lot of the other hunter fights. And that's just due to the quick nature of it. Now, I'm not sure if I was over-leveled, but I felt like I wrecked this boss way too fast. Not to brag or anything, but I kind of was expecting it to be more of a challenge. It is kind of cool in this first phase how a second watcher will come to attack you, but there's a third one who will help you out, as long as you don't accidentally hit him. But you'll see here, in just a few, not even a minute, I already defeated the first phase. So, after you defeat the first phase and you defeat this watcher, it's, I believe he's summoning like the blood power or spirit of all the other fallen watchers. And then he sort of becomes this like mega super one or something like that. But in any case, there's another phase 2. This is definitely something very common in the Dark Souls 3 bosses, the multi-phased fights, and I'm okay with that to a certain extent. Sometimes it can make the fight a bit of an endurance fight. Not necessarily can you beat the boss, but can you go without having to heal too much? Right? And this fight is one of those, but there's a few later in the game that could be compared to that. The challenge is just how much health you'll need to heal over how long of a fight it is. So this phase is definitely a lot more tougher, because as you'll see, he's following up a lot of his attacks with fire AoEs, or sort of blasts from the sword. But again, I think having played Bloodborne really helps with this fight, because you basically need to be fast on your feet and be able to dodge quickly, and then sort of get around and get in a quick hit here or there. And since he's a humanoid enemy, it is possible to get a nice stagger on him, and you still can even backstab him or parry him if you'd want. I just kind of was more focused on the dodging. It's definitely a really fun fight, mainly because of how first you feel outnumbered and then you slowly overcome them. It's a really great tribute to the Artorias fight. It's got really fun mechanics, it's fast-paced, and it's intense, and I always look forward to this fight, even if perhaps it seemed like it was a little easier than it should have been. Again, I don't want to seem like I'm being some kind of a show-off or anything, but I don't know, perhaps I did finally get good at Dark Souls, or perhaps the game is a lot easier than its counterparts. In any case, the Abyss Watchers is one of the best boss fights in the game. The next boss we will be fighting is High Lord Wolnir, who resides in the catacombs of Carthus. The area is essentially a redo of the catacombs from Dark Souls 1, but it is definitely more merciful because a lot of the skeletons don't respawn, and the ones that do only respawn once. So it's an alright area. Not one of my favorites, but definitely kinder than Dark Souls 1, as most of the game is. So I'm not the biggest fan of this boss, but I will say the design and the idea, the arena, is very cool. You're going to touch this chalice, which then transports us to, I think, the Abyss, or at least some kind of form of it. And in this area, of course, you're going to want to go to the nice big shiny thing, but as soon as you get there, Wolnir will appear. So, he may look intimidating, but he does have the typical video game boss weak spot, which is the signature big glowy item. In this case, it's these rings. And basically, what you need to do is just do enough damage to each ring, and then that will cause them to be destroyed, thus doing a lot of damage to him. Now, I've seen other videos where he summons like a poison mist around him, and he can also summon a bunch of mini skeletons, but he never did that in my fight, or at least I never encountered those attacks, so it was pretty a simple, quick fight for me. And maybe I just got lucky with the randomness to it. In any case, in terms of lore, I read some interesting theory that he might be the chosen undead from, or the bearer of the curse from Dark Souls 2, as there's an item description that suggests that. But in any case, simply be quick, attack the rings, and you will conquer High Lord Wolnir. After that, you get teleported back to where you once were, and the door to Irithiel will then be opened for you to progress to where, as most of the game says, the real fight begins. Overall, though, I'll say I do like that Wolnir has an interesting design and style to the fight, even if it can either be too easy or annoying. He's definitely not what I would say a bad boss. Just, there's a lot better in the game, which we thankfully will soon be getting to in the next area. In terms of the mini-bosses, this is another fight I wanted to show, just because this is a very cool enemy here. This is the Carthus Sandworm that you find in Smoldering Lake, which is an optional area you get to by climbing down the broken bridge right before High Lord Wolnir. Now, I don't really fight this monster normally, though, but basically there's this area where you can dodge around from the ballista you can see in the distance, and the ballista fires at and damages the worm, and thus you don't really have to fight him. Now, what I didn't know is if you were to go just a little bit behind where I'm running around, there is a little ditch that you can stand in. You'll be completely safe from the ballista, but the worm will still be out attacking, and the ballista will still be firing. And then you can completely, totally cheese the fight without having to risk taking any damage. I decided to be a little more creative with that, dodging around. And I just like this worm because he's basically a thresher maw. And of course those are essentially the worms from Dune or Tremors. So it's just a nice little cool thing. And defeating him gets you a lightning miracle. The next boss we'll be fighting is the Old Demon King. This is an optional boss found in Smoldering Lake. Now, essentially he's pretty much the same in terms of design for that demon mini-boss you fight on the way to get to Smoldering Lake. But he does have a lot more of a moveset, and he can be actually a bit of a tough fight. At this point in the game, you'll see that a lot of his attacks are doing a decent amount of damage, and I think I go through most of my Estus in this fight. So, the entire Smoldering Lake and Demon Ruins area is one giant reference and redo of the Lost Izalith and the Demon Ruins from Dark Souls 1. And I'm totally okay with that, because as many fans of the series would know, the Lost Izalith was an incomplete area in Dark Souls 1. It was heavily rushed in development, and it really sort of shows. It kind of feels like things are just sort of dumped around and incomplete. And so I like that they were able to redo it in a more developed and stylized way. Granted, this area can be a little annoying in terms of the maze-like element, but I kind of enjoyed it in a way. There's a lot of variety and layers to it. And so, in this area, you'll see that we're literally fighting amongst a pile of dead demons. There's the Capra demons, the Asylum demons, the Stray demon, and the Taurus demons, and I think you can even see the Centipede demons here as well. And the Old Demon King is the last of his kind, and he's essentially giving one last hurrah of a fight. And it ties into that Stray demon we saw earlier on the bridge. He's kind of a withered husk of a demon way past his former glory. And it's showing that in this Age of Fire, the demons no longer rule, but instead they're essentially slowly dying out. And I think this may have to do with the princes killing them off. I know that the princes fought with the demon prince, and that was why they are cursed. As for this fight, I do enjoy that he has a lot of attacks, the AoEs, the fireballs, the sort of like slow sweeping fire attacks. They all make for a nice challenging fight. He's definitely like a good balance of like not being overly difficult, but the right amount. And I think my problem is I was probably being a little too cocky, because, again, almost every other fight in this point I had beaten first try. And so I think I was running into this fight with the attitude that this one would be as easy as the rest, and the difficulty is slightly upped here a little bit, mainly if you're unfortunate to get caught in too many of the AoEs. And so, at this point you'll see I only had one Estus flask left, and so I was trying to do more ranged attacks, even though katanas and throwing knives are probably not the best to damage him. I had a friend who was watching me at this point, and I was annoyed because he told me that that wasn't an AoE, but it clearly was. And I don't think you can see it in this video, but one thing that's interesting is, like, during this last phase after he does that AoE, he actually doesn't attack. He'll try to lift his weapon up, and he'll try to do like a pathetic attack, but he won't be able to because he's done his last hurrah. It's kind of similar in style to what Sif would do when she was weak. So yeah, overall, it's a pretty cool fight. So, next boss, we're actually going to jump ahead through a lot of areas, because this is another Lord of Cinder, and this is Yhorm the Giant of the Profane Capital. Now, if you've been following Siegward's quest, and you've properly kept him alive, you've gotten his armor from Patches to save him in the well, and you found him in the dungeons, then he will appear here when you start the fight. It's automatic, you don't have to summon him or anything. And his assistance here is definitely valuable and important, because he has a Storm Ruler of his own. So that means he's very good at aggroing Yhorm in the fight. And his duty is that he had promised Yhorm that if Yhorm should fail his duty as a Lord of Cinder, that Siegward would come here to, put him out of his misery. But unfortunately, he kind of died while I was looking for the Storm Ruler in my inventory. So I didn't realize that, like, once he's dead, he's dead. I homeward boned out and came back again. But you'll see I picked up his armor there, because he's dead now. So I had to solo this fight, unfortunately. So basically, if you try to fight Yhorm normally, he'll be very tough, because he has the girthiest health bar of all time. But what you need to do is grab the Storm Ruler. It is sitting next to his throne, and you need to charge it up by holding the weapon skill button, which is L2, I believe, if you're on PlayStation, which I am. And you need to just constantly hold it. You can still dodge and charge it. And when it's fully charged, you would use R2, I believe, to then do the full attack, and doing so will deal massive damage to Yhorm. You can also specifically lock onto his head, which does even more damage. So this fight is a bit more of a set piece than an actual fight, but it is a very, very entertaining one, and this Storm Ruler is a reference to Demon's Souls, where you use the Storm Ruler to defeat the King of Storms. So I think it's a really nice piece of fan service, and it makes for a really entertaining fight. Yhorm himself has such a really great, tragic story about how he was ruler of this land, but in linking the first flame, the profane flame of the capital, then basically incinerated all of the inhabitants. Thus, Yhorm essentially lost his will to protect himself. He got rid of his shield and decided to two-hand his giant machete instead. So, he's got such a great story, and many people probably hate Irithyll Dungeon and the Profane Capital for being annoying and difficult, but I actually really like them because it's such an oppressive atmosphere, and it really feels like you've sort of come to the light at the end of the tunnel when you get through, have this great set-piece battle, and defeat a Lord of Cinder. Granted, it is still very sad that, the Knight of Katarina had to die, but at least we made it. So, continuing forward to the last segment of Iudex, this is Pontiff Sulyvahn, and he is a tyrant who grew up in the Painted World, and he came here to basically become a ruler of his own. And his first thing basically was to totally screw up all of Anor Londo and the Old Gods. There's a very deep and intricate story behind him, and essentially he used Aldrich to defeat Gwyndolin. And when we find Aldrich, Gwyndolin is like being devoured by him. Now, in terms of the fight, Sulyvahn, he is very weak to parrying. If you can parry him and do a riposte, it does a lot of damage, which is why I was using the target shield. But I don't know why, but for some reason I was just terrible at parrying throughout all of Dark Souls 3. I think it's because all the animations are faster and the parry windows are very small. They're not nearly as generous as in like Dark Souls 1 or Bloodborne. So, in the end, I realized I was failing at parrying this fight, so I just decided to go back to regular two-handed katana. You'll see when Pontiff is weak that he has this shadow, and the shadow always does what the real one is about to do. And so you can use that to give yourself a bit of a heads up as to what the next attack will be. And nice thing is that the double, he doesn't have much health of his own, and he dies pretty fast, but Sulyvahn will summon another one soon. So, I heard this fight was really tough, but you'll see I did only get like one good parry, and I think I did all right in the fight. But again, this is definitely one of the better fights in the game because it's difficult. He's got a very interesting move set. There's such a very in-depth story behind. I don't have time to talk about all the details in this clip. It's one that I really wish I could fight more often, because he's a really great one. My main advice is to either get good at parrying, or, again, sort of read his double to know what moves you'll have to be dodging. The next Lord of Cinder that we will be fighting is Aldrich, or Altbitch, as we like to call him, because this guy is annoying. So, this attack that he opens with, the arrow attack, is the raining arrows of death. During the beginning, that attack isn't so bad. It's near the end when it just seems to last for like ages and tracks you all over the entire arena. So definitely watch out for that move. So Aldrich is a devourer of gods. He's this soupy pile of sludge that we saw in the intro. And currently he's in the process of devouring Gwyndolin, who was the son of Gwyn, who was then raised as a boy. And the head of the Dark Moon Knights sworn to protect the holy pair, Guinevere. So that explains why Aldrich has so many of these attacks similar to Gwyndolin. Of course, the area you fight in is Anor Londo. It's literally called Anor Londo. And, you progress through Iudex, get to the top of the area, and then that's where we find this area again. So it's pretty much another fan servicey area, again, as I said in my opening review, I like that this game sort of plays like a greatest hits of the series. You know, you're reminiscing on all the good times you had. Granted, this fight is nowhere near the level of awesomeness as Ornstein, however you say it, and Smo, however you say that. But, despite the fact that this can be an annoying fight with this arrow spam and all the magic, and just, trying to get close, it still is definitely a entertaining one and a good challenge. And, it's nice to know that you're putting this guy, you're taking him down, not really putting him out of his misery. He's just a Lord of Cinder because of how strong he is that he devoured gods. But I think that's about all I have to say for this fight. I just remember this last little bit was very close because I was running out of Estus, and I just needed to get one more hit on him. And I actually missed there, and I thought, no, don't die with like 1 HP to go. That would be very annoying indeed. Now, after you have defeated all of the Lords of Cinder, besides the Prince, Emma, who is the old woman that gave us the banner to get down from the high wall of Lothric, she will teleport us back to her, thus indicating the next path we must take. So, we're going to get teleported back to her, and then this will allow us to fight the boss, the Dancer of the Boreal Valley, who is another one of the guards that the Pontiff Sulyvahn had placed in the kingdom of Lothric. Now, the fun fact about this is that if you do decide to attack and kill Emma anywhere in the game, you will be able to fight the Dancer as a boss then. However, you will most likely not be powerful enough. I remember I tried this on a friend's account, and I got a few good dodges in, and a few good hits, and then I got one shot. So, it's definitely recommended that unless you are truly a masochist, that you wait until Emma dies here to get the Basin of Vows. Now, the funny thing is that I thought you might have to press X or something on the statue here, but walking forward is enough to trigger the cutscene. And of course I still was running low on Estus from the Aldrich fight, so my first thought was to just nope out of this area the second I could. But at least we get to watch the intro cutscene first. This here is the Dancer. She is a very fun boss fight and has a really good moveset and really illustrates the sort of graceful dance-like nature of fights in this game. But before that, we're just gonna nope right out of there, because I'm not taking on that fight unless I have all my Estus. So now this is where the real fight for the Dancer begins. Like most bosses, again, remember the golden rule and stick to that booty. I find that for the first phase of the fight, if you just stay to that area, she doesn't really attack a lot, and she doesn't have a lot of variety of moves. You just have to be ready to dodge when she does, because they will hit quite hard. The weapon I'm using here is the Black Blade, which you get in the Mimic chest leading to Smoldering Lake. it's a katana that has a lot of bleed damage, but it doesn't have much range because it's very short. I also don't know why I had so much lag there for some reason, but let's ignore that for now. You'll see that this second phase, the Dancer becomes pretty relentless. She has like that spitting top of doom attack, and she really will beat you down, and you won't get almost any moment to heal. You have to be very extremely precise with your dodging. But as I was saying about the Black Blade, I like it because it has the same title as one of my favorite Blue Oyster Cult songs, The Black Blade. So, that's just a nice little thing, the reason why I use it, even if it's not the best katana in the game. The story behind the Dancer is that she's much like Vordt. She was a knight of Irithyll that is placed to, of course, prevent those from getting to the area they need to be. Vordt keeps those from leaving the High Wall of Lothric and from entering, and the Dancer thus keeps us from ascending into the main castle. But with enough perseverance, we will conquer this fight. She's definitely a very entertaining fight, and I like her design, and it's overall a really nice fight. Once we have defeated the Dancer, if you go to the left, you will enter an optional area known as the Consumed King's Garden. Progressing through this area will lead you to Oceiros, the Consumed King. He is very clearly a homage to Seath the Scaleless from Dark Souls 1. Now, lore-wise, I believe the idea is that Oceiros, the king, had this child Ocelot with the queen, who may or may not be Guinevere. There's also a theory that Guinevere is Rosaria, the mother of rebirth. But in any case, this guy's a little mad that we trampled into his secret place, so we're gonna have to fight him. Now, the interesting thing with this fight is that I guess you were originally supposed to see Ocelot, and it was a little too violent when Ocelot gets squished when Oceiros enters phase 2, so they just made him invisible. At least that's how the rumor goes. So Oceiros, he is deceptively difficult. And that's because he has quite a variety of moves, and several of them have follow-up attacks that will hit where you want to dodge. And he does have a very decent health bar, so I think, like the old Demon King, I was probably playing a little casual on this fight when I should have been taking it a little more serious. But, I do like this fight. It's definitely got a great story to it, and, that bit where he screams Ocelot, it's great for all the memes. So when he enters this second phase, he becomes incredibly erratic. It is possible to sort of stun him to do more damage, but the tricky thing is that since he's moving so erratically, it's very hard to tell where you need to dodge, and he'll chain together many different attacks, and he'll sort of just charge randomly, and thus making it hard to tell where you need to hit, where you need to be, and making it difficult to get a hit in when he's running across the entire arena with a single attack. In a way, he's a little more comparable to a Bloodborne boss than in terms of just the franticness and the intensity. And, a lot of times it's not like he's even trying to hit you, he's just sort of running around in this blind rage. So I did use a lot of Estus in this fight, and he definitely got a lot of good hits on me. My dodges probably could have been better, but again, this is the first time I had ever fought him. The main trick to this fight is, just you kind of gotta get good at dodging and know when to do the heals in properly. And you just gotta stick with it. He's definitely a fun optional fight. It's not like it's a well-disguised fight or anything. There's a very obvious path to get to him. But what you do want to be fighting him for is the Path of the Dragon gesture that you get from the next area after, because that will allow you access to Archdragon Peak. You'll need to go back to that sort of altar shrine area in Irithyll Dungeon, where you got one of the dragon torsos originally. So definitely make a point of doing that. So even though it's optional, this fight is definitely worth doing. And just getting to hear him yell Ocelot is always great. Another reference to Seath is that you can use the soul we got from him to make the Moonlight Greatsword, which you got from cutting off Seath's tail in Dark Souls 1. After you have defeated the Consumed King, you will emerge in a dark, otherworldly version of the Cemetery of Ash. This is the Untended Graves. It's literally the exact same area, but it's all dark. And once again, we will be fighting Iudex Gundyr. However, this one is Champion Gundyr because this is him at his full strength. I think the idea is that we're essentially back in time when Gundyr was going to be the unkindled one to link the fire. But in his time, he was too late, and his firekeeper had already died. And that's why it's all dark, because the fire has gone out. But it does mean that he's at maximum strength now, so he is a lot more of a challenge. He moves faster, he has more attacks, he does more damage. So he's just basically the super upgraded version of the tutorial boss, which, I think is a nice idea. I'm not the biggest fan of the Asylum Demon reskins in Dark Souls 1, mainly because the only difference is that they have an AoE that reaches a lot farther than the animation would suggest. But for this fight, he's legitimately a lot tougher and different in many ways, and lore-wise it makes sense that he'd be more tougher when, he's not corrupted by that weird dark pus monster thing. So, you'll see I didn't really struggle too much with this fight, despite him being upgraded, but it is really cool and really awesome to go back and fight him in his prime. And yeah, not much more to it, just, an upgraded version of the tutorial boss. But it's important to go through this area because you get one of my favorite katanas in the game, the Chaos Blade, and you also get some Black Knight weapons, and you get the Firekeeper eyes, which are important to unlocking one of the game's endings. The next boss encounter we have, ascending Lothric Castle, is the obligatory Ornstein fan service, and that is the Dragonslayer Armour. Now, as to whether it's Ornstein or Ornstein, I'm going to say Ornstein, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. So, the Dragonslayer Armour, he is this set of armor that's being controlled by those pilgrim butterfly things we see flying around. And I think they're on their way trying to ascend and become angels, if I believe. There's this angelic lore throughout Lothric that is very rarely touched upon at all until like the last area. But apparently it's very crucial to the story. And in any case, these pilgrim butterfly things, they'll start sniping you out while you duke it out with the armor. So they can make it a little tricky to try and dodge everything. The armor himself, he's not too difficult. All of his moves are pretty heavily telegraphed. His big ground pound slam attack is easy to dodge. And as you'll see, I kind of wrecked him pretty fast there. I like this fight better than just fighting the old Dragonslayer in Dark Souls 2, because it wasn't just a copy-paste of Ornstein. It was, like, actually its own boss in a unique way. I do think it's interesting that they did just copy and paste him for the Ring City DLC, though. Kind of ironic in that way. But, in any case, it's a pretty good fight. So, now that we have finally ascended Lothric Castle, we are ready. The final showdown has begun. The eclipse is beginning. The fire is fading. And it is time for us to defeat the last Lord of Cinder. Those snarky, pesty, spoiled brats of princes. Prince Lothric and his brother Lorian. So, this fight is very, very dependent on the randomness of the moveset that you can get. Because it's Lorian who teleports around. Sometimes he can be very erratic with the teleportation. You'll see what I mean when we get to the actual fight. But, in any case, I like this cutscene, just the way that the prince just seems to be so fed up and done with all of us, implying that there's been many unkindled in this place. And you see the prince, he just doesn't care anymore. He just wants it all to be over with an end. Though, I think it would have been interesting if perhaps you could get an ending where, instead of defeating the princes, maybe you do side with them. Because you'll see when we get to the endings that we can choose to, not link the fire. Perhaps an ending similar to Bloodborne, where we decide whether or not we actually want to fight Gehrman, or whether we agree with him. But, in any case, this is the princes. So, Lorian, he sort of will just crawl around and do these slashes at you with his sword. What makes it tough is that he's pretty brutal and fast on the swinging, which means you don't get much of a chance to heal. And he'll annoyingly teleport away to do that ground pound slam attack. And, if you get caught in it, it's not as devastating as the similar attack that Ludwig from Bloodborne would do. But it still will hurt pretty badly. So, really the trick is to just get one or two nice swipes and dodge around. And this is the phase of the fight where you should try to get through while taking minimal damage, because there is a phase 2 to this fight that is much more tricky. And so, what'll happen is we do manage to kill Lorian, but Prince Lothric, he's going to teleport down and revive Lorian, and then we'll have to fight them all together. It's definitely a pattern that I've mentioned before in the video, but a lot of these boss fights do have multiple stages to them, and I like that they were finding ways to make the boss difficult by, making the fight change partway through, rather than just being one singular test of getting through a health bar. And yeah, no, this is definitely a really great, entertaining fight. And mainly because I just love, beating up on these princes. Because they're so bratty. At least that's how I like to think of them. Also, for frame of reference, the weapon I am now using at this point is the Chaos Blade that I got from the Untended Graves in the Dark Firelink Shrine. It's a really great katana because I'm pretty sure it has the highest damage scaling. The only slight drawback to it is that you do lose a very tiny portion of health with every successful hit, but I feel the damage is minimal enough that it is worth it. So you'll see in this phase that now the brothers are helping each other out because Lothric, he's going to be shooting spells at you the whole time, all while you're still dodging Lorian. Now the trick, what you need to do is you need to kill Lorian, and then Lothric will be down, and you can get a bunch of damage in on him. But the good thing is that if you're attacking Lorian directly from behind, you'll still do damage to Lothric, so you can weaken him before you even down Lorian. It's definitely a nice mechanic and interesting way it works. But again, the annoying part is that you have to really watch out for those teleportations. I find it easiest to make sure you stay locked on. And that's because the lock-on will sort of stick with him when he teleports around. But I was actually kind of surprised how much damage I managed to do to Lothric while he was on his back. You'll see I only had to kill Lorian once to be able to kill Lothric, which is good because sometimes you don't get that damage in, and you have to kill Lorian again and again and again. But in any case, that will mark the last Lord of Cinder. We can now progress back to Firelink to get to the final boss area of the game. Before we get to the ending and DLC of the game, there is one optional area we have to conquer: Archdragon Peak, and with it, the Ancient Wyvern. So, this is not really a boss fight, it is a puzzle set-piece moment, because you're not going to fight this wyvern. You're going to circle around the area, fighting a bunch of these snake lizard monsters until you can get to the area where you can do a plunging attack, and that will one-shot the wyvern. So again, it's a little weird to consider this a boss fight, as it's just more of like a set-piece action moment, and I'm sort of okay with that. I mean, it's definitely entertaining and fun and inventive. Just, you can't think of it as a boss fight, because it's a little disappointing in that you don't really fight the boss. So, I mentioned it already, but the way you get to Archdragon Peak is you need to get the Path of the Dragon gesture, which is in the altar room behind the Consumed King. And then you need to go do that gesture in this area in Irithyll Dungeon, where you found a bunch of other figures doing the similar gesture. So, progressing through, then you just have to circle around the area. And these lizard guys, they can be annoying, especially these two-handed dagger ones. They're just like R1 spammers, and they just stunlock you. They're very frustrating. But in any case, really your biggest challenge will probably be either to not get incinerated by the fire, or to fight the big old axe and chain version, which we'll see in a bit. So, there isn't really a trick or a strategy to this fight. It's just circle around and kill all the enemies. And I just put on the Princess Ring, and that's because, and again, I'm still using the Chaos Blade, which takes away health, but the Sun Princess Ring slowly recovers health. So I kind of find that they balance each other out. I also think it's funny how there's about like 10 notes in this area that just say try plunging attack. They want to make it very obvious to the player, even though at this point you've probably already heard and seen and figured out how to do this fight. So there isn't really much lore to this boss. I mean, it's a wyvern, it's a dragon, it's a monster, and it tried to kill us, so now we're gonna kill it. But I will say, this is definitely one of my favorite areas in the game, Archdragon Peak. It's just so gorgeous and aesthetically pleasing. I like that it's very hidden away. You can constantly see it in the distance, but getting to it is quite a challenge. And of course, once we get to the Nameless King, I'm sure I'll do enough gushing over how great of a fight that is when we get to it. But still, I've always liked the dragon areas, like Dragon Airy in Dark Souls 2. And I've also always liked hidden areas, because, it gives this element of mystery, this idea that it was meant to be a secret locked away. Like Ash Lake in Dark Souls 1. It's probably one of my all-time favorite areas just out of the entire series because of this mystery that it has. So, this is the Axe and Chain guy, and you'll see he can be quite frustrating in that he's got a lot of attacks that are difficult to dodge, and he's very powerful. He's not on par with those whales from the fishing hut in Bloodborne, thankfully, though. So, not the worst enemy to deal with, but I guess he can be annoying if you try to fight him on the bridge, while you've still got that other lizard guy shooting fireballs at you. Then there isn't much else I have to say about this fight. Essentially you just go through, dodge the dragon fire, and fight the lizard guys. I'll say one thing that was funny though is coming up you'll see that I actually ran past the area you're supposed to jump down, and that's because I just didn't realize I was already there. I was kind of just like, oh, that's it. I guess I got to the spot already. Now, you do have to be careful because you can miss the plunging attack and then you'll kill yourself by falling too far. So, one thing you could do for safety is put on the no fall damage ring, the Silver Cat ring. But in any case, jump off, stab this thing in the head, and get your awesome badass action set piece moment. Still, that is totally worth it for a set piece moment, because that was pretty awesome. And I'm not exactly sure why, but after you defeat the Wyvern, you get teleported to the area with the next bonfire. But it is just after that fog gate we saw, like right after it, so I'm not sure like why you got teleported to that. But, in any case, you're going to be right next to a bonfire when you spawn in. So, there you go. Nice and simple. Okay, here we go. This is the big challenge super fight boss thing. This is the Nameless King, a boss with a difficulty hype through the roof. And, yeah, he's tough. So, basically, when you get to this part of Archdragon Peak, you can pull this lever to ring the great bell. And when you do that, I'm pretty sure this summons the king. It causes this giant storm to happen. So I think what you're supposed to do is explore the area first, like to get all the dragon headstones and torso stones before doing this. And that's why there's the note warning you. And you'll see just how powerful this storm appears to be, right? Because once we've done this, then you can walk along those clouds to go fight the Nameless King. Here's how I'll illustrate how tough the fight is. Most of the bosses that you've seen me fight so far, I beat on either my first or second try. Nameless King took me so many tries that I gave up. I went and I beat both DLCs and then came back to fight him, which is why, I have such a higher level of health and all that. So this is a two-phase fight. The first phase is the King of Storms, which you should get good enough at to do almost flawlessly. Unfortunately, I always seem to have a problem with actually being able to hit the damn thing. So, what you need to do is, I find that locking on is only useful just for sort of getting a fix on where the beast is. It can be very annoying if you're close because, you sort of get stuck looking straight up, and then like that you lose your concept of vision. The good thing is that most of his moves are heavily telegraphed, and as long as you dodge at the right time, it gives you plenty of opportunity to go in and attack. And the other good thing is that if you do enough damage, you can get a visceral attack that will really heavily damage this. Like, you'll see here, I get this visceral, and I take him for like a good quarter, nearly half of his health. So, once you've defeated the beast, this is where you really fight the king. You'll see here that he sort of puts his companion out of his misery, and then, summons him, uses his power to, up his own strength or something like that. I'm not sure. Kind of reminds me of Ornstein's Smough again. That idea of, killing the partner that just died to absorb their power. And, you can just tell from this cutscene that, this guy, he does not mess around. The reason why he's the Nameless King is because this is Gwyn's firstborn son. See, Gwyn, he, of course, wanted to defeat the dragons, but we know that his son turned against him, and thus Gwyn erased him from history. That's why this king is nameless, and why he's so hidden with protecting these dragons. So, now, Nameless is not tough in terms of being unpredictable, because, as you'll see, he telegraphs every one of his moves very obviously as to what he's going to do. But what is difficult about him is that every one of his attacks hits so hard. So if you don't have, stupid points in vitality, and you aren't using the lightning defense ring, then, he'll probably, 4-shot you or something. And since he attacks so fast, you almost never get a chance to properly heal. Another thing that makes him difficult is that most of his attacks are sort of timed, so that if you roll and dodge an attack and then panic roll right afterwards, his windup will have lasted, so he'll perfectly hit you when your second dodge finished.
So I'm not exactly sure how I managed to beat him this time. I just all of a sudden noticed that he was at low health. But again, you can't get like over anxious, which is a problem I have with this fight. You just got to make sure you dodge properly, because you'll see there were many times when I just was panic dodging, and that he, perfectly hit me there. So that is definitely the biggest challenge of the fight, is this unending sense of urgency that you've got to keep dodging, and it's fast-paced and intense, and you've got to remain calm. It's definitely not easy to do, but that's the trick to the fight. So don't get scared. So after we defeat him, the storm will clear, and we're able to go across this bridge area now. You get a Titanite slab from the area, and you can also get Ornstein's armor set as well. Though I have to say, I don't think it looks as good as the Dragonslayer Armour set. That, I don't know, looks a little cooler. But in any case, I believe that is all of the bosses for the main game, apart from the end boss, thus making time to enter the DLC. So, the first boss of the first DLC, this is the Champion's Gravetender and Discount Sif in the Ashes of Ariandel DLC. So, this DLC you're going to enter by talking to Slave Knight Gael, who will be right by the Cathedral of the Deep, and he'll teleport you in. So, I'm not a fan of this boss. Basically, he's just like an NPC fight, and he has 3 wolf enemies that, you can quickly dispatch in like 1 or 2 hits, and he can kind of be a bit of a turtle with his shield, but you'll see his guard's quite easy to block. The only annoying thing is if he sort of spams his sort of shield lion attack. And then, when you get him down to low enough health, he's going to summon a large wolf to fight the Greatwolf. But you'll see that since this guy's so weak, it's pretty easy to just kill him before the wolf even gets here. You'll see I'm sort of wandering around waiting for him to show up for a bit. And then this wolf, he's pretty much identical to the large wolf enemies that you fight near the beginning of the DLC. The only annoying thing I found is just he kept spamming that charge attack, which I found hard to dodge, and it does take a decent amount of health. But really, if you've mastered fighting those regular enemies, then this one's not really much different. The only thing is I think he gets a bit of a buff near the end, which makes him charge faster and attack more. Again, as long as you don't get incredibly overconfident and play it smart, he's not too bad. Just watch out for the crazy rage bit near the buff, and you should be fine. This boss is optional. You'll find it by cutting the main rope bridge, similar to the one in the catacombs, and then progressing down a series of very difficult sort of branches that are intertwined. The only reason you would need to do this boss is that he gives you the item to access the undead arena, the sort of versus mode of the game, which I haven't really played much because it was kind of hard for me to find a match. But after that, you're going to keep progressing through to this area underneath the main cathedral, and it's here that you'll find this contraption, and doing so will activate the
secret passageway to behind Sister Friede. Well, it's kind of funny. I sort of stumbled upon this by accident. Like, I went through the area and opened the doors to get back through, and I kind of thought, okay, well, what have I really done? And then when I was exploring down there, I found that, and I thought, oh, this is some kind of, like, super secret extra thing, but no, it's actually the thing you need to do, because this is gonna open the doorway to the main, final, epic boss of the DLC, and it's gonna be quite a long one indeed. Other things I have to say about the DLC, it is a very aesthetically pleasing area, and there's a nice enemy variety, but it did feel a little short, and it didn't feel too special. This is the main boss of the Ashes of Ariandel DLC, and it is a 3-stage boss fight, fighting Sister Friede, Father Ariandel, and then the super combined version, Black Flame Friede. So, the first time you walk in, you'll see Father Ariandel here. He's asking for Friede to bring him his flail. And I guess he's, like, whipping himself and filling this cauldron of blood because they're building up the rot of this world, or something other like that. I'm, again, not too well versed on the lore. But, go and talk to him, and then Sister Friede will come down, and she'll be very upset. Now, I'm not really sure if it's Friede or Friede, but Father Ariandel says Friede, so I'm gonna go with that. I also really love his voice, that accent of his, it's very nice. So, yeah, you're trespassing where you do not belong, so we've got ourselves a fight, as usual. This boss fight is definitely one of the toughest in the game, and that's mainly because you have to do 3 boss fights in one stretch. There's other fights where, you know, maybe you empty a health bar, and then there's a second health bar, or you get the health bar down halfway, and then there's a second stage that's entirely different, but this is, you have 3 separate health bars over the entire thing. So, for this first stage, for some reason it was very tough for me, even though it shouldn't be. And that is, I found that, like, I really wanted to try and do this section while using as little Estus as possible, so I could save it for the later stages. So, I recommend use headphones for this fight, because when Friede does this attack, where she jumps up and goes invisible, it's very easy to hear where she went if you're using headphones. I also decided I would sort of choose this fight a bit by using arrows, because you'll see the arrows don't go invisible, so that's very helpful. And hey, you know, I don't use magic, so I may as well use some form for ranged attack. I think what also makes this fight very difficult is that Friede has a very fast movement and recovery time, so there are a lot of times where maybe you get like a dodge or a hit in, and then she's able to quickly jump back before you can actually get that hit on her. So that definitely can be very frustrating. But after you down her in stage 1, she's going to sort of bleed out, and then the father, he's going to get all upset, and a new contestant enters the fight. now we're going to have to fight both of them, because she's going to be alive again. And yeah, this is definitely a very, very epic cutscene. I love his scream. I love the way he just breaks his chains and destroys everything. It's great. What I like about this next stage of the fight is that there's, a bit of a way to compensate for the fact that it is two enemies fighting you at once. And that is that they share the same health bar. So if you want, you don't even have to attack one of them. You can just focus on a single one, which I like. And so, what I did for this is I kind of cheesed it. I mainly used the bow and arrow to just shoot Father Ariandel from a distance, but, it's in the game. It's a legitimate strategy. It's not like I was, hacking or something like that. And hey, the game's hard enough as it is. Give me a little bit of a break. So, here we go. This is the big epic fight. One thing that's nice that is balanced about this is that the father is, he has a lot of charge attacks, but he does move slow, and I find that the sister likes to keep her distance, and usually just sort of spam the frost attacks at you. So, if you can get nice and far away, you can sort of do a good job of balancing them apart. I find it's even possible to do this, even if it's just you fighting them. You can easily separate them. But obviously, this is a good fight to do co-op on, because you can just have each one deal with them separately, or just gang up on one. One trick I do with this is I like to wait to use an ember until after I know I've reached the third stage. The other thing also at one point is that Friede, she'll start healing him, so that's a good time to get damage in, because you won't get attacked by her. If you're close to her, obviously I would recommend attacking her. I wasn't, so I just decided to beat down on Ariandel. And again, this is similar to Ornstein's Smough. The trick is you just have to learn to separate the two and not get ganked up. I do like that this fight does feel like a fair gank. It's not a Dark Souls 2 style one where the idea was, how can we make it difficult? It was, how can we make this, fun and balanced? So, with that down, let's get the Emperor going. And you'd think everything's over, but it's not, because now she's coming back again. She refuses to quit. So now their souls are combined, and she's now Black Flame Friede. And now this is where she's basically like Lady Maria in the third stage. She's got ice attacks, she's got dark attacks, she's just going absolute all out. There's AoEs everywhere. This is a very tough stage, and it's even tougher by the fact that you might be down a lot of Estus or other items because you've just had to fight two bosses beforehand. So, essentially this is why I cheese the first two strats by using a bow and saving the Ember, because I know I'm going to need all my Estus for this fight. Despite the fact that it's a difficult fight, it still is one of my favorites in the game. It really gives you that thrill of the battle, despite the oppressing difficulty. Again, this is one where you basically just have to practice and learn and be fast and mobile, because those frost attacks she does will, throw you up into the air afterwards, and she follows up so many of those dark attacks with extra AoEs. So you have to watch out for that. Again, it's just a matter of getting good. Other than that, I don't have too much else to say about this fight. I think the sort of epic skill of this fight does make up for the sort of mediocrity of the DLC. Like, you've got the first area before you get to the cathedral that's sort of just an area to get through. There's not really much to it. It's just an area of enemies you get through. Some of them can be a little annoying, like the wolves that constantly spawn in to get you, or there just seems to be so many of them. And then you've got the second area, which is the actual town, and that place is a little more interesting because I like the way you slowly start discovering the rot and everything that's happened as you progress through to find the painter. So I like the second section a little more. And the first boss is definitely a little meh, but in the end, definitely makes up for it with a fight like this. So, after you've done that, you've beat the DLC. You can take that bonfire at the end to get to the second DLC early, if you'd like. We now enter the second DLC, the Ringed City. But before we can get to the Ringed City, we've got to drop in to the next boss. So this is the demon in pain and the demon from below. This is another dual boss fight, sort of trying to capture that magic of Hornstein and Smo. Harvey say their names, I don't know. So, basically, the way it works is that both of these demons have similar attacks. You'll see that they have a slightly different color scheme, though, to differentiate them. The demon in pain is this more dark orange, whereas the demon from below is the sort of brighter orange. And you really want to have them so that one of them is buffed and one of them isn't. When their fire is out, they sort of are a little more passive, and instead they'll just spam poison attacks to you. But when their fire is active, you'll see they'll be much more aggressive in attacking you. And you do need to kill both of them. I thought it would be that at first you just have to kill one and then the other would absorb its power, but you do have to defeat them both. Of course, once you've defeated one, defeating the second one is quite easier. Now, the trick is that after you've killed them both, they'll resurrect as one, the demon prince. But he'll have a few different attacks depending on which one you killed first. So, I found that the easier one to deal with is if you kill the demon in pain first. Because the special attack that the demon uses is very easy to punish. So, again, the main tip with that is crowd control. You just need to be aware of which demon you're fighting, and hopefully you get a nice timing of having it so they're not both buffed at the same time. If they do, then you kind of want to be on the run. So now, the second part of this is the Demon Prince fight. So, this one, his main attack, you'll see in a bit, is like a laser beam from his mouth that lasts for a long time. And it's really nice when he uses that because he just sits there and fires the beam for a long time. This is the attack right now. So it's very easy to just stand behind him and attack. It's not like he has a way to stop you from doing it. You see, I even get a visceral in there. The reason why I don't like fighting the other one is because his super attack is like this sort of like Dragon Ball Z Goku Hadouken Spirit Bomb type thing, and it's like he just like puts a bunch of fireballs in the air and just brings them down, and I have no clue how you dodge it, and I got like totally one-shot by it. So I avoid fighting that one because this version of the prince, he's a lot easier of a fight to deal with. Lore-wise, I believe this is the demon prince that Lorian fought and then got cursed by, which is why like they don't have legs, but they're sort of interlinked. I don't know exactly, but I know that that was the idea, that they slayed a demon prince, and that led to them being cursed. So, it was probably this one. But, in any case, we're gonna fight him. It's always fun when you can finish off a boss with a visceral attack. So yeah, it's a very good fight. I do feel it's balanced. It's not overly difficult so long as you know what you're doing. And again, good luck if you do happen to unfortunately have to go up against the Spirit Bomb. So, with the prince down, we're now going to be free to enter the Ringed City. So, during our quest through the Ringed City, we're going to come across this lovely, happy, friendly dragon known as Darkeater Midir. And throughout your course, he's going to be a bit of a environmental hazard, but during this bridge section here, you actually do have to fight and kill him. Well, you don't kill him yet. You're just going to knock him down into the pit. So, I really like this because it's sort of a play on the common Dark Souls thing of having a fire-breathing dragon drop down while you're on a bridge. It's something that they had ever since Demon's Souls. But I like that in this case you actually have a legitimate fight against him. Because usually in the other situations, it's just a matter of finding a safe camping spot and shooting 100 arrows until the dragon flies away. But in this case, you actually get to get up close and fight him off, which I like. The strategy I found is you want to stick to the side of the bridge that I'm on and slash away his wrists. And when he does the Godzilla beam, you gotta stay away for the first bit, and once the fire is away, you're able to get in close because the purple version of the laser is going to not hit you. He'll sort of do this enrage attack near the end, and he just kind of hits everywhere, and I don't know if it's possible to avoid getting hit, so I kind of just get away from him and tank the damage. And after enough hits on him, he's going to go down and you'll get a nice visceral attack on him. Here we go. And that'll send him down into the pit. But the fight is not over yet. You'll have to get down there to finish the job, which I will now show you how to do. So, from this bonfire here, you're going to go down the elevator after you've opened up the shortcut. And there's going to be a pathway that you'll roll to on the left side here. And then from here, you go into there. There's a knight that's actually an illusory wall. You just have to hit it. If you're constantly talking to the princess, or not Filianor, Knight Shira, whatever her name is. She'll give you that clue to go there. But you have to make sure you talk with her after you've beat Midir on the bridge, but before you go down to fight him. So, this is the Darkeater Midir fight for realsies. I'm not gonna lie, Darkeater Midir is one of the toughest fights in the game, and potentially in the series. And the reason being is that a lot of fights in Dark Souls are kind of structured in difficulty because the boss hits very hard, right? So, a lot of bosses, they got a lot of attacks, and if they hit you with one or two really good attacks, they could kill you right away. And that's what makes it difficult. You have to make sure all of your dodging is on point. But a lot of those bosses are countered by the fact that they do have very obvious tells, and that it is very easy to get hits on them. So, I think of a boss maybe like Velstad or Vendrick in Dark Souls 2. Yes, they may hit very hard, but at the same time, you do have to just circle strafe for the win, because they're humanoid enemies that are swinging melee weapons. Darkeater Midir is more tougher in this aspect because he's a dragon, so he has a lot of fire AoEs that last for a while, and they'll sort of stun you for a lot longer than you'd think. And also, the really only point of him that is gonna do decent damage when you attack him is the head. So, not only do you have to stay back to stay safe from all of his various attacks, but you also have to try to get in close enough to actually do damage to him. The main attack he likes to spam is that one where he leans back on his back legs and he fires into the ground. What I like is when he does this Godzilla Ion Beam, Hadouken, Kamehameha, whatever it is, because it'll leave him vulnerable, and the beam is always the same, so the best way is to approach him from his left side, so that you can get in there and get a lot of hits. And that's really the toughest part, is that there are so many times where I want to stay back to stay safe from his attack, but I do also, of course, want to get in and get a hit, and so the fight lasts very long because of this. But regardless of the difficulty of this fight, I do really love it. I already mentioned that I do think this fight has a bit of a Godzilla influence, mainly with his Ion Beam attack. It's like Godzilla's main sort of atomic breath, whatever it is. And it's just great to have a dragon fight that just feels like a really fun, difficult dragon. But again, quite a difficult fight. Lore-wise, I think the idea is that Midir might have been like a guardian of the valley, and he's now corrupt by the dark, and that's why Shira wants us to sort of put him out of his misery. This is a really tough moment, because Midir, he's gonna like summon all these lost souls, and they home in on you, and he's doing his fire attack, and he's charging, and he's going crazy. He really wants you dead. And this phase you have to pretty much handle the same way as phase 1, just with the added concept of dodging the extra attacks. Because I feel he's definitely more relentless. And, just roll like crazy for dodging that, and watch out for the AoEs, of course.
I will say, though, this does have one of my favorite moments, and that is if you're able to get a visceral attack in on him. It depends if you do enough damage, but I feel he's more vulnerable to it. You'll see that he's just hitting like an absolute freight train right now, but it still feels like a fair fight to me. I don't think there's any like thing that I would complain about. Like, I wouldn't change this fight. Though I will say, I have no clue how I survived this, because you'll see I've got a sliver of health left, and I got trapped in a corner, and I only had one Estus left. And I just got so lucky that that attack happened to get me to trigger the visceral. And that is a great moment. Charge in and get that last hit. If you can get that visceral, it'll take out a giant portion of his health. And there you go. So defeating Midir will give you the Spear of the Church Covenant item, and that allows you to get summoned as the Half-Light boss, which we'll see next and talk about that. But first, I'm going to go grab my 40,000 souls that I was trying to look for at the beginning of the fight. There they are. Excellent. So, before we can uncover the secrets of the egg of Princess Philionor, we have to defeat the Guardians, the Spears of the Church. So, this is Judicator Argo, and he doesn't want us to go see the princess. So, of course, we're going to politely listen to him, go back home, have a nice pint, and wait for this all to blow over. Or we can not do that, and we can actually do the fun part. So, this boss is interesting because depending on whether or not you're online, you're going to actually fight another player as the boss. So, Argo, he's going to summon a Painting Guardian, and he's got a bunch of special powers and stuff, and then he's going to summon a Spear of the Church, which, if you're online, that's another player in that covenant. This is very stylistically similar to the old monk fight from Demon's Souls. And it's very hard to rank how difficult this fight is, because there's so many factors that will affect it, like the RNG of the NPC, or how good the player you're fighting is, or how equally matched you are. I really wanted to kill this Painting Guardian fast, but as you see, he was just dodging me so much, and then decided to constantly spam his dagger attack. So I kind of felt I spent the most of this fight running away, and just getting one or two hits in. And even then, it seemed like the second that I went to use Estus, that's when the Painting Guardian would start spamming his daggers on me. Now, one thing that does make it balanced is that the player who's invading, he can't heal himself, but the Painting Guardian will do that at a few select times. So there's a bit of balance in there. And also the health bar for the boss is the regular health of the player. It's not like the player gets a boosted health bar or anything. And you'll see things got really difficult here because the second Painting Guardian joined in before I could even kill the first one. So I don't really know how I made it out of this fight alive, but somehow I did. Again, it really depends on how good the player you're fighting is and how well equipped you are. You could always try playing offline to fight the NPC. It might be a little easier, but I haven't done that. Though, if you do find the Purging Monument, you can actually pay souls to revive Judicator Argo so you
can do this fight again. Again, whoever this player was that I fought, he definitely did a good job. It was a close fight. I did manage to come out on top in the end. I think I just sort of got lucky with getting a few hits in there. So, yeah, it's a nice experiment of a fight. I like what they did with it, and it's nice to sort of see them do a bit of a throwback to an older boss fight style. And with that, we're going to progress forward to Princess Filianor. So now we've finally come to the end of the world, because after you touch the egg of Filianor, it breaks open, and I guess we're like teleported through time, or something like that. And this lovely fellow over here is one of the pygmy lords, and from what he says, we can sort of gather that the Red Hood, that is Slave Knight Gael, he's come here to consume all of their dark souls, because he's hell-bent on his quest to find the blood of the dark soul for the painter in Ashes of Ariandel. So, this is what it all has come down to now. A fight between two warriors at the end of the world over the blood of the dark soul. And I absolutely love this boss fight. I think it was the perfect way to end the Dark Soul series. Obviously, it's not the true final boss, that's the Soul of Cinder, but in terms of the last boss that was created and came out, it was this one. So, here we see Slave Knight Gael. He's trying to drink the blood of the pygmies, but I'm pretty sure that their blood is all dried up because it's so far forward in time and they're so old. But, he still recognizes us. And I do think it's interesting that he was leading us all these clues for us to find him. And yet when we do, now he just wants to fight. Which is kind of sad, because, he was a bro. He could have helped us out during the fight against Father Ariandel. He left us all these messages and these notes. And now we've got to fight. So, obviously I didn't beat him the first time. That's quite a difficult feat. But I like that you have this really large area to fight in. So, similar to most of the two-phase fights, I usually wait to activate an Ember until after I know that I've cleared phase 1. So, in this first phase, he's pretty erratic. He's got a lot of wide sweeps, usually with a lot of odd follow-ups, because he does these wide sweeps. And he's also got several charge attacks where he'll jump through the air and charge at you. And he also has sort of a very powerful combo, which he does telegraph. He does a little roar before. And basically when he does that, you want to make sure you get far away, because he swings around erratically. If you get caught in one of the hits, then you'll probably get hit by all the others. But he does follow it up with a jump attack that gives you a few seconds to get some nice hits in on him. So, this is meant to be the easy part of the fight, and it's okay to take some damage during it, but you'll definitely want to save the majority of your Estus for the second and third phases. And I think the important thing with this is just to not panic too much. It is slightly easier than it seems, and with every couple of hits you do get a stagger on Gael. That gives you a nice chance to punish him. So, it is kind of funny that, this guy, who didn't seem like much, ends up becoming one of the most powerful warriors in the series. And
this cutscene, I really like it. It kind of reminds me of Ludwig's cutscene from Bloodborne. I guess he sort of regains a little bit of humanity, or a little bit of purpose, because now he stops fighting like a beast, and more straight up like a warrior. He goes back to two-handing his weapon, and regains his composure. And this is such an epic cutscene. We get to see him summoning the last of his power for a final-ditch effort to fight for his purpose. It's just so amazing. So, second phase of the fight, get the Emperor ready, and here we go. He has so many attacks in this phase. He has that little bow and arrow contraption, and his cape actually is now a weapon. That's how badass this guy is. And the cape usually will follow up every attack and add an extra hitbox to them. So, not only do you have to dodge the sword, you've also got to be thinking about how to dodge the cape follow-up. And a lot of times you're probably going to take a bit of damage from it anyways. And he has like this sort of like boomerang lightning disc attack. I think it's called the Wave of the White Circlet. Not sure, but basically after you dodge it, you gotta watch out because it's gonna come back to him like that. And he is a boss where strafing around and dodging is effective, but only so much, because a lot of times he'll step back for other attacks, and once he goes to phase 3, it's just all over the place. He goes like full Orphan of Kos mode. He's got like this lost souls, he's got the lightning strikes that come out of there with very little warning. He's got so many delayed charged attacks, and it just seems like he can have combos that last forever. And I didn't even know he had that invisibility attack, and he almost got me with it. But then, I don't realize that he has like 6 follow-ups to the attack. The lightning comes down. It's such an intense fight, but I love it. I was almost sad when this fight was over because I wanted to fight it again. Definitely one of the best bosses in the entire series. Maybe my favorite in the game. Kind of hard for me to pick a favorite. There's usually never a definitive one, but definitely top 5 material. Just an epic fight between 2 warriors at the end of time over the Dark Soul. And hey, it is kind of cool that, we finally got to the end of the last game in the series, and we finally start talking about the Dark Soul again. It only took us so long to get there. I actually almost lost this fight too, because I tried being cautious and healing before attacking, and then, of course, he has so many quick follow-ups. Why I don't think he's as difficult, though, as the Nameless King, is that you do have a lot more windows for healing and attacking than against the King. And the King hits a lot more harder, too. So if you get hit once, you're probably down for half your health. Then you want to heal so you don't die. But since he hits so fast, you're probably going to take damage before you heal, and then you panic, and then you get got. Whereas Gael has a few more opportunities. It's just a much longer fight, though. And again, don't get greedy, but also don't get cautious. You'll see that I keep trying to heal up here, and he keeps on hitting me right before I can get the final hit in. And I swear I don't know what I would have done if I would have died right here from that hit. But with that, we will conquer Slave Knight Gael, thus securing the Dark Soul for our own. And after this, that's the end of the DLC. There is one other ending you can do, which is you go back to the painter and give her the Dark Soul, and she says she'll make a nice fine world that will eventually be a home for somebody. And that essentially is the end. And it's on to the end of the game for us now. Okay, so this is it. The final boss for the final game. The end of Dark Souls 3. And very appropriately, this is going to end in a relatively similar way it began. Or at least the way the first one ended. You know what I mean. This is the soul of Cinder, an amalgamation of all of the previous lords that we fought. And one thing I think is funny is I think I was about to get invaded, because I'm pretty sure there's a message saying that the Dark Spirit went home, so sorry, but I guess we'll have to duel another day. So, like I said, the soul of Cinder, he's essentially all previous players of the game put together, which I think is brilliant. I think this is, if you had to end the series, this is the most appropriate final boss, the best way to do it. So throughout the fight, he's going to change his form of his weapon into these different styles. Like, he starts off with just a regular sword, and then you'll see right now he's using a spear, but he also has a lot of miracles, like Emit Force or Wrath of Gods, one of those ones. So it can make the fight challenging because there's a lot of moves to learn, and you never know which one he's going to use or whether or not you'll actually have to fight a certain stage. I remember one time I co-opted with a bunch of guys and we killed him so fast he didn't even have a chance to switch out to a different phase. But I think it's the Falchion that he's using is a very difficult one to deal with because he's got a lot of fast swings and he also uses pyromancies. So, essentially I'd like to treat this fight kind of like a PvP fight, in a way, based on the way that he does it. And, yeah, it's really awesome, just fighting the amalgamation of all the previous lords. And, I wouldn't say it's the toughest fight in the game, but it can be a little more challenging than you'd appear to believe, mainly in the second phase. You'll see here, you think you've got him down, but then, sort of as this last hurrah, he summons the spirit of Gwyn, and this is a really great moment. His piano tune comes in, and then he goes into Gwyn's version. And that big combo that he uses, that's the one you need to be careful of, because if you get caught in it, it's impossible to dodge out of it until it's over. And he follows it up with this sort of fire ground pound slam that will really wreck you. In fact, near the end of this fight, I almost got killed by it, and I was very lucky. I didn't want to have to do the fight all over again, but it's a fun one nonetheless. So, best thing to do when he winds up for the big combo is just to keep your distance. And for those of you wondering, I finally decided to fight with something other than katanas for this last fight. This is the Selward or the Sellsword Twin Blades, I believe they're called. You can get them relatively early in the game. And they have a nice set of attacks, specifically if you use L1 when you're two-handing them. But not much else more to this fight. You just gotta finish this off to determine what you want to do with the final flame. And, it definitely has a melancholic vibe to it, which is definitely the atmosphere that I'm sure they wanted to create, because, it is the end, and it's the death of a really great character, but still was a good time. And here, I think he was just determined not to let me heal back to full health. He really wanted me to do that. But, yeah, with that being said, this will be the end. you will have conquered Dark Souls 3. Praise the sun. Again and again. So, after that, you can decide which ending you want, but they all happen when you touch the bonfire. So, I'm going to go into a few details on how exactly you pick your ending, but it'll be based on the events you do over the course of the game. The good thing is that there is a New Game Plus mode, so you don't have to worry about accidentally starting the game over again. So, for the first ending, what you need to do is give the Firekeeper her soul, which you will find at the top of the shrine. You need to buy the tower key to be able to unlock it. And after you do that, she's able to heal your dark sigil if you've accumulated any from dying while branded with the dark sign. So you need to heal the dark sigil, but that requires a lot of souls based on your level. So, I saved up all my boss souls so I could record this, and I did a lot of farming. So, I came back here when I had the right number of souls through the power of editing. And so, then, after healing the dark sigil, you'll no longer go hollow. And that's the first step, because you'll see that if you were to link the fire while you're hollow and you've done some certain character events, then you'll get a certain ending. So that's the first step. Because now, as you see, we'll go here and link the fire, and this is just sort of the general good ending, I'd say. Sort of similar to Dark Souls 1. We've linked the fire, and the world will go on for another cycle. I like how it's also not as sort of bombastic or large, grand as the end of Dark Souls 1. It's just fire sort of shimmers a little, and we sit down at it. A far cry from that large explosion at the end of the first one. And that is the end of Dark Souls 3. But that's no fun, is it? So let's go back and try that again. So for another one of the endings, you need to acquire the Firekeeper's Eyes, which you will do in the sort of untended graves, the version in the past with Champion Gundyr. You have to go through that whole pathway, and you'll find the Eyes of the Firekeeper in the area that corresponds to where the maiden that sells miracles, her name escapes me at the minute, but she's off sort of to the side passage to the left of the entrance. And so you go get the eyes from there, give that to her, and I guess from her dialogue it seems like you're allowing her to see beyond the nature that a firekeeper would normally see, because they're normally blind or they're mute or something like that. So this, as you say, you'll wish for a world without flame. So this is kind of like sort of saying, like, screw the cycle or the end or anything like that. You're not going to do that. I'm not exactly sure how it works. This story is still confusing me, but essentially you have one end where you usurp the fire, and then another where you sort of like take it for yourself, and I guess this is like the end of fire. You're just getting rid of it, bringing on the dark. So they're all kind of dark endings, but you have sort of that choice on what you'd like to do. Anyway, she's gonna ramble on for a bit more about this intricate, deep story that we have so many wonderful YouTubers to thank for helping us decipher. All great people. But she does also say that if you don't want to do this ending, you can just kill her and she'll get the eyes back. So, that's nice. You've got options. And they're all okay with that. So now, when we go back, you'll see that there is a summon sign. So, by summoning the Firekeeper, you will start this as your ending of choice. And in this ending, the Firekeeper will arrive to take the fire away, thus causing it to die and plunge everything into darkness. And it's an interesting choice for the end. It's kind of like they sort of split the dark ending of Dark Souls 1. Because in Dark Souls 1 you let the fire die, and then you became the Lord of Hollows and all that. And in this one, there's an ending where you take the fire away, but then there's also the ending where you sort of absorb the fire and then become the Lord of Hollows. So, who knows? I mean, these games are all cyclical in some way, so I think regardless there's going to be some form of a repetition anyway. And so there's a bit of a hidden ending as well. And you'll see here that you get a few seconds where you have the opportunity to move around freely. And I think during this ending where I don't do anything, I sort of move around a bit, and that shows you when the time to do that is. And if you use the quick second to attack the Firekeeper, you'll get a new cutscene and you'll take the fire for yourself. But if you do nothing, then everything just sort of fades away to nothingness, and all you hear is the sound of the Firekeeper's voice. So, yeah, that's your moment right there. You get like one quick second. So, don't charge up a big spell or anything, you might not get it off in time. And that is another ending to Dark Souls 3. But that's no fun now, is it? So, let's go back and try that again. So, this new ending here is where, instead of doing nothing, you're going to attack the Firekeeper. And it's, I guess it's a Maiden in Black reference, because you do this head stomp in the cutscene that's similar to a head stomp you do on the Maiden in Black if you kill her before she quells the beast at the end of Demon's Souls. So, once again, always proving that FromSoft can have the right amount of fan service here and there. So again, you just gotta pretty much like mash buttons and move around so that you know when you're able to get that hit off at the last second. And when you do, then you'll get this cutscene here. So the maiden dies, and you will wrestle the fire away from her, because I guess you're just a heartless bastard or something, and you want to kill this awesome waifu of yours that's been helping you level up throughout the game, So, yeah, this is a pretty evil ending, because you went and killed the one who leveled you up and stuff, so I didn't pick this ending, I I'm just doing it for video purposes. But at least you have that option. But taking the fire away is one thing, but you know what's even better than that is being the Lord of Hollows and having your own world to yourself. So let's go back and do that again. So for this ending, there are a ton of extra requirements you have to fill out, and it's not really easy. But sort of to try and list them off in a simplified version, you have to talk to Yhorm of Londor. He's a pilgrim who looks similar to this one, and you find him sort of at the very edge of the broken bridge when you first arrive in the undead settlement. And then you have to get him to draw out your true strength, which allows you to level up for free. And then you're going to get branded with the dark sign, or the dark sigil, I believe. And so every time you die, you're going to accumulate points of hollowing, so that turns your character more and more into the beef jerky look. And after you've accumulated enough points and you've leveled up 5 times for free, he'll die, I think after the Abyss Watchers, and then Yuria of Londor arrives, and what she wants you to do is take Henri here as your spouse. So we're about to get married here. Yay! It's so much fun. Weddings, drinks, and food all around. And yeah, it's definitely not a traditional wedding, that's for sure. But basically, you have to keep Henri alive and make sure Henri gets killed by that pilgrim when she's sort of arrived in the Earthiel of the Boreal Valley. So after you get married in this cutscene here, taking place in the Dark Moon Tomb, of course, then you'll get enough dark sigils so that you can become a true Lord of the Hollows. So now, when we link the fire, instead, we're going to take it for ourselves and be recognized as the true Lord of Hollows. I guess we absorb it into ourselves or something like that. I don't know exactly how the practicality and the rules for souls transfer and hollows and all that stuff works, but that's the general idea, I guess. So hey, you gotta become a dark ruler and stuff. And I think even one of the hollows here on the side is actually meant to be Henri as well. So, hey, that's pretty cool, I guess. And I love that shot there. It always makes me think that you're about to pick up the moon in the background. It doesn't happen exactly like that, but yeah, there we go. You're the new Dark Lord. And there, oh yeah, there's Henri there. So see, you didn't kill Henri. You just had your awesome wedding, and you're going to make Londor whole again, because this whole game series was secretly Dead Space, or something like that. In any case, there you have it. That's all the bosses in Dark Souls 3. Again, shout out to all the awesome YouTubers that inspired me to make this video. Shout out to all of the people who've subscribed and watched and made these my most popular ones. And I'll make a promise to get ready for Dark Souls Remastered. I'll see you in the next video. Have a good one.